Today I'm going to show you how to get cables to show up on the knit side of the fabric without any other fuss. They don't even have to have purl stitches to set them off. We will look at 3 specific cables. The trick to making this happen, the cables be visible on the knit side with no other manipulation, is to keep the columns of stitches that represent the cables moving very, very frequently. And some really classic cables are made in this way. I call this technique Wanderlust Cables because the cables have to wander across the fabric to make it work. And although the ones I'm showing you today are quite small, they can appear enormous. More about them and about projects to make with them in my book, Wanderlust Cables. All of these stitches take place on 8 needles. They're all versions of an 8-stitch cable. If we wanted to, though I did not for the sample, we could have also laddered down next to the cable and reformed that stitch as a purl stitch, or we could have had it on the ribber. But because the stitches keep moving, these are versions of what I call Wanderlust cables. They will show up on the right side of the fabric, even in the absence of purl stitches to set them off. I mean, the knit side as the right side in this instance. Many times with cables, the purl side is the right side of the background fabric, and only the cable stitches are knit stitches. This section represents the first one that I will show you, and it looks like loosely twisted ropes. This cable is sometimes called string of pearls or wavy lines, both of which are more or less apt. And the only difference between the first 2 cable samples is that when we move these stitches towards the center to touch one another, we do not cross them. You'll see that shortly. The third sample is a version of the Hugs and Kisses or XO cable. And there are several versions, but in it we move stitches together and cross them to make X's, and apart and close them to make O's. It's always the same kind of cable crosses, as I'll show you. There's another version of the XO cable that has the X made exactly as I'll show you, but the O's made beginning and ending with cable crosses. And often that version, because we've lengthened the ends, we shorten the sides. The one you'll see me do, there are 4 rows here. Sometimes it's done with only 2 rows here, but after the cable cross, a row, and after this cable cross, after the cable cross, 2 rows, and after this cable cross, 2 rows. All kinds of variations of these have occurred throughout history. They all make quite a lot of drama down the center of a garment for very little work. As you join me, I have just crossed the 2 center pairs of stitches. You can probably see the X right there. This is the hardest row of this pattern that puts the most stress on the needles, so I frequently allow them to knit back from home. Knit 2 rows. I've got these centered on 0, so we lift the pair left of 0, and on a separate tool, the single 1 stitch farther out from center, and move the pair out and the single in, and perform the same operation on the group right of center, always starting with the pair from the center, moving it out first, and moving the single in second, and knit 2 rows. For some reason, and I know what I should have done, these didn't all knit off. I can fix it manually, but I will know in the future to allow them to knit back from hold. pull the needles outward, that is, and have them knit back from hold. The reason that helps is because we have done half of the work for the machine in that we pulled the stitch through the needle one direction, and it now only has to knit back. So all is as it should be. Now the operation we did last, we repeat, except that we move it outward. These two center stitches are now background stitches. These are the two that were traveling. So we pick them up again and repeat the operation again. And we'll do this on the second side as well. That one's a background stitch. These two move out. This one will move in behind them. The traveling stitches always get transferred first so as to be visible. For this example, that's as far out as I'm going to move the stitches. But just so you know, you could keep going. Having learned from my mistake, I'm going to bring them forward and let them knit back from hold. We've normally been knitting 2 rows, and that is a viable option for this design. But to create a somewhat more elongated shape, I'm going to knit 4, so 2 more. That is about as many rows as you can do with this design and still have these columns of stitches show up as a cable. Now we're going to reverse everything we just did by bringing the traveling pairs inward. Let's see, those 2 are background. This is the traveling pair. This is the single that's moving. They trade places. 2 rows. We do it again. I've knitted 2 rows. I'm ready to do the second moving in. You can always actually check your work. You can get used to reading the cable from the back side. Here's where it reached its farthest out point. There's our first step inward. So these must be the 2 traveling stitches. And this is the background stitch they need to trade places with. Same thing on the other side. These 2 move in. This one moves out. The ones we want to show on the face of the fabric as the cable are the ones that should always be replaced first on their needles. And 2 rows. At this point, the cable stitches are now these 4. And they're side by side, and we have a choice to make. I'm going to do it this time the way I began it. So these 2 will cross, these 2 sets. And this is the hardest one, as I mentioned, because it's the most stitches crossing. It's also the easiest one to drop a stitch off the needle as you try to resettle them. Without making a cable cross here, it still makes an interesting design, but it's slightly different. So what I'm going to do is repeat everything that I just showed you, moving each set of 2 out 1 space and knitting 2 rows, moving them out again. Oops, wrong ones. And knitting 4 rows and bringing them in again, just as you've already seen. And next time we'll try the alternate way of doing things. And I nearly lost that stitch, but I think I can rescue it. The main thing cables require is concentration. And of course I'm talking and working at the same time, which is less than ideal, but how else can I teach you? Okay, knit 2 rows and out and then back in again. I've made the first inward move, knitted 2 rows. It's time for the second and final inward move with reference to the pairs of stitches that are in the front view. And here is where you can do something slightly different than the cable cross and get quite a different look with only one small change to the maneuver. We'll knit the 2 rows, and now we simply won't cross. We'll begin moving out immediately. Same operation as before, simply omitting the cable cross at the very center, the 2 over 2 cross, and omitting the 2 rows that would be knitted immediately thereafter. Knit 2 rows. Now I'll make my second move out, the 2 moves in. I'll do it a couple of times and we'll look at the fabric. The cable called X's and O's, or Hugs and Kisses, is very similar to the wavy lines or small diamond cables, but it starts out a little bit differently. To make an X, we of course want to start with the outer pairs of the 8 usually stitches involved, but it can be different numbers. The legs of the X can be different lengths, but I'm going to do it with 8, and we need to start with the outer pair moving in. This will be the bottom of an X. As you can imagine, its legs start apart. So we'll begin moving them in. As with all of this kind of cable, those stitches that you want to appear as the cable on the front of the fabric are the ones crossed first. Knit 2 rows. Find those traveling stitches, which are now here to either side of 0 with 2 between them. And now we will move the traveling stitches inward, move the background stitches outward, doing the same thing on each side. These are the traveling stitches that will appear on the front, therefore they get settled first on their needles. This one moves out. And to make the first knitting row easier, because we've got stress on these needles and yarn, we pull them forward and knit back and home. At this point, the legs of the X are touching. But what does a real X do, the letter X, when that's the case? The legs cross. So we cross the cable, 2 over 2. Doesn't matter if you go right over left or left over right, but you normally do want to keep that consistent throughout your project. My choice is to go right over left when there's only one direction in use. Knit 2 rows. The legs of the X have crossed in the center, and now X legs move apart towards the top of the letter. So we will move them apart. That's the pair we want to appear in the front. This is the background stitch. This is very, very much like the wavy lines in every way except the exact order in which things happen. In other words, all of the traveling stitches are 2 stitches moving on the front of the fabric, trading places with a single stitch moving on the background. But to make an X look, we start with the outer stitches moving in, cross them, and move back out. And for the other versions, we started at the center. These stitches have reached their outermost points, knit 2 rows, and the X is complete, and you can sort of see a shadow of it. But now we want an O. So we start in the center for the letter O. Move outward. Bring the background stitches in. Same on the other side of 0. Knit 2 rows and repeat. But of course, you're not in the same position. Our traveling stitches have moved outward, so we pick them up from the point where we last placed them. There they are. One background stitch even farther out. Goodness. Then the traveling stitches. Traveling stitches out. Background stitch in. And knit 4 rows. Now the O stitches begin to move towards the center again to close the O. On each side of 0, there are 2 background stitches and then the 2 O stitches. Inward. 2 rows. Inward. And now our stitches will be back to the center, and the O is complete. So this time when we knit 2 rows, we will begin the next X. Now instead of picking up our stitches where we left them, counting out from the center, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 and 4 are the stitches that move towards the center to make an X. So I'll finish one more X and we'll get back together and you can have a look.